Hey everyone, we're a couple minutes out and I'm going to start on time. I have a full deck to get through. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm really glad that we had such a big turnout. We have such a big turnout for this exciting topic. It's something that I think is just the heart of how everything works between ShoWorks 2020 and ShoWorks Auction. Today, I'm going to show you how data moves to and from ShoWorks 2020 and how that data impacts ShoWorks Auction and vice versa, and when and how the data moves from system to system. We're going to send out a replay of this video to you all and store it in the knowledge base. If you're watching on your computer, I'm going to be going through a lot very quickly. Feel free to open a document and take a screenshot of screens, type notes as you go. I'm going to move fast. You're going to have another copy to watch later, but just wanted to forewarn you, it's jam-packed. Y'all have seen this before. If you've joined us, you can go to fairsoftware.com/auction. That's going to take you to our auction dedicated website. From there, you can do a few things. One, you can join the knowledge base that holds the vault of all of the information that we share. And if there's anything updated, we update in the knowledge base first. Feel free to follow us on social media, ShoWorks Auction. You can also view the auction demo where you can register as a buyer yourself. You can also do some add-ons, place some bids, pretend to pay if you want to pay. You're just buying me dinner, so really don't buy, don't pay. But then you can also view AuctionCast, which I'll show a little screenshot of that here. You can also schedule a meeting with us if you want to do any follow-up. Usually a lot of my conversations with each of you goes into more detail about the functionality and the admin site, and as well as the buyer site and what that looks like and what that feels like. But today is a lot more technical into the data. So hope that you are just as entertained. ShoWorks Auction was designed as a standalone product with a focus on really deep integration with ShoWorks 2020, as you're going to see today. This webinar is going to specifically cover how the data is designed to flow between ShoWorks 2020, online entries, and FairVault, as well as ShoWorks Auction. And this is all as it pertains to ShoWorks Auction. There's a lot of stuff that gets done, functionalities in ShoWorks 2020 that you'll do, but this is all very focused on moving your lots online to be available for add-ons or even a sale. First, what happens is once you have requested your online entry session, you're going to set up your new fair file for the current year, and you're going to upload your setup to online entries. Secondly, once entries have been submitted, those entries, they come down into ShoWorks 2020. At the time those entries are created, a win ID is created and attached to that entry. The win ID is what links data from all of the systems together. If you have decided to use the former method of collecting buyer pre-registrations via your Fairwire site, that buyer data can also be pulled down into ShoWorks 2020. From ShoWorks 2020, the Provision Auction button can be used to activate the ShoWorks Auction online site. Prior to the show, the site can be open for buyer pre-registration or early submissions of add-ons. And after the show and final sale order have been set, a re-provision or a first provision will send updated lot details and buyers and sponsors and adjustments over to the auction site. Then the auction is going to take place. You're going to start gathering transactions, buyer registrations, and that data is going to flow back into ShoWorks 2020. The ShoWorks Agent Auction Monitor tool is new for 2022. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but you're going to have those buyers, destinations, sales transactions, buyer transactions, and buyer payments flowing. Working as an independent process, images and videos are loaded in FairVault, utilizing the online entries user interface, and those images and videos are imported into ShoWorks Auction independent of the provisioning process. The images and videos are matched to the lots based on the matching win IDs. This means that you can provision, get all of your data over into ShoWorks and work on your photos separately. And there's a button to basically load those, which I'm going to show you. I want to point out the various tools that move data across the system. The upload setup moves your setup to your Fairwire site onto online entries. Your download entries pulls entries from the Fairwire site down into your ShoWorks 2020. If you've used online entries in the past, you should be really familiar with these two items. Moving over across the toolbar, you're going to see the Provision Auction button. This is what pushes data to the ShoWorks Auction site. After lots have been pushed to the auction site, you can log into the auction admin site and go to the Images and Videos module. Clicking Reload All pulls images from FairVault if they're sitting there. 2022 marks the introduction to ShoWorks Agents Auction Monitor. Auction Monitor is an application that sits on your computer and brings data from the auction site into ShoWorks 2020. It's especially useful on sale day when you want to streamline your buyer registration, and you will have your data, you register online and the buyers appear within ShoWorks 2020. But this is a little system tray that sits on your computer that you work with us to get set up before your show starts or sale. I'm going to go into more detail about how it's used, but the last tool for moving data is associated with Auction Monitor, and within the auction admin system, there's a couple of tools. One is the Competitive Lot Winners Clerk Winning Bids button. All of this sits under the Auction Monitor module. And then there's a last button called Push Data to ShoWorks, which pushes everything that has been done on the auction site over in one big swoop. It's usually a last ditch effort, not used frequently, and there's very specific instructions of when you would use it, but these are the buttons that you would use. Keep this in mind as we get a bit deeper into the data that moves back and forth. I'm going to use slides like this to summarize how the data flows from system to system. The key in the bottom left-hand corner, it's showing that the green is where data is going to flow automatically using the new Auction Monitor tool. And the yellow arrows are used to show where data is being pushed on demand. This means that you're triggering it yourself by clicking a button. So let's go ahead and start talking about buyers. You have the choice when you create your FAIR file each year as to whether or not you choose to copy your buyers over from previous years. Some of you will do this and some of you will not, and all for your own various reasons. Regardless of what you choose, it's assumed that if you have a buyer list in ShoWorks 2020, you need to understand that when you provision over to the auction site, that buyer list will go over to the auction site. As soon as you publish your online site to buyers, it is wise to designate which system will be your system of entry for your buyers. I'll discuss at a future point how it's possible to enter buyers in both systems simultaneously, but it's not recommended unless you put the proper fail-safes in place. The provision button is what pushes the data over to the auction site. And once you've sent out your site for buyers to use the online site, you'll be collecting buyers online. I'm going to just do a quick visual of how this works. Many fairs are choosing to go ahead and enable the online auction for buyer registration ahead of time because you're ultimately communicating one site to buyers, making it less confusing of where to go. The buyer data can real-time update in ShoWorks 2020 with the ShoWorks Agent Auction Monitor turned on. Some of you will still choose to use online entries, Fairwire site for collecting buyer registration, especially if you have historic buyer data. Buyers are able to log in and manage their accounts through that method. Ultimately, buyers can access final billing statements on that Fairwire site. So, but that data must be downloaded into ShoWorks 2020 before provisioning to the auction site. One thing that is notable of what you just saw is that's how easy it is for a buyer to go and find their name in the list if they already existed. If they don't exist, then we actually have to go and they'll register themselves. And so in conclusion, buyers can register themselves and that data is going to come across. As they're registering, one thing to note is that this is where in the auction admin site, you can see the buyer list building here. If an administrator needs to enter or update a buyer, they can use the online admin site and use this add button right here. One thing to also note, just data-wise, the thing that doesn't appear in ShoWorks 2020 when the buyer data goes over is that the administrator does have access to see the computer-generated security code for each buyer. It is in this second to last column right here. Anytime a buyer is added or updated in the auction site, it automatically comes over to ShoWorks 2020 when Auction Monitor is turned on. And so I have the green arrow showing that that data automatically comes. I have added a few slides that are going to look like this, and these are things to note. It is notable that a unique buyer ID is created in the database that you never see. It is what links the buyers in the auction site with the buyers in ShoWorks 2020. If you update a buyer name, a buyer number, or any buyer data in ShoWorks 2020, then it will not change in the auction site unless you provision. You have to click the provision to auction button sitting in ShoWorks 2020. If you update a buyer name, buyer number, or any buyer data in ShoWorks Auction on the online site, it will change in ShoWorks 2020 when Auction Monitor runs. You want to avoid collisions with buyer names or buyer numbers by using one system. We have set up what are called provision warnings. Because the auction site doesn't have access to the changes being made in ShoWorks 2020, we are very dependent on the provision feature to identify any issues. At the time of provisioning, the system will try to do automatic resolutions of the conflicts to the best of its ability. But more times than not, a warning is going to be generated and you will need to manually adjust the conflicts. It is your responsibility to keep up with these conflicts. You have opened up 2 unrelated avenues for buyers to register, and this can cause issues with any 2 systems. So for best practice, you can enable one before utilizing the other. One of the provision warnings that you're going to get is upon provisioning, if there's a buyer number conflict. The buyer number coming from 2020 is changed in ShoWorks Auction to have a decimal number if there is a conflict. Let's say you had two 20s, two buyer number 20s. Buyer number 20 that's coming over from ShoWorks 2020 is actually going to get changed to 20.01. This is for valid reason. It keeps your buyer coming over, allows them to still be a part of the online auction. You're going to get a warning, and so that you can go back and fix it, but it doesn't put you dead in the water. To fix, there are two options. One, you change the buyer number in ShoWorks 2020 and re-provision. But let's say that's the one you wanted to keep whole. That's the buyer that wants to be buyer number 20. Then change the buyer number of the ShoWorks auction buyer of the same number causing that conflict, move it out to an available number and re-provision. This is an example of an email that you'll receive regarding your provision that gets made. You'll be notified in an email with the subject of ShoWorks auction provision on this date and time, successfully provision. And you can see where buyers were changed from a whole number to a decimal number to ensure the buyers crossed over to the auction site, but maintained unique data integrity. In this example, I went overboard generating this and I had a ton of buyer conflicts. And so what you can see is it's telling me your file had at least one buyer with an ID number taken by someone else. The following changed to avoid collisions. And it's letting you know that your ShoWorks 2020 is not going to reflect this change. So in this case of number nine was changed to 9.03. Heed these warnings, and when you see them, go ahead and make the fixes. It tells you how to fix it right here, those fixes that I talked about. Find the buyers whose numbers were modified and change them and re-provision. And then it's fixed. It's fixed before you even get started. Heed these warnings because the consequences can be detrimental to the ease of how the transactions and data comes back. I'm going to go a little bit more into buyer numbers. At the time of your first provision, buyer numbers on your existing buyer list will be brought over to the auction site. At the time of any additional provisions, if there is a buyer number conflict, that's when you're going to get that warning that we just saw. In both systems, buyer numbers are assigned to be the next available number. So if you're sitting in ShoWorks 2020 and the last number that you originally had in your buyer list was buyer number 100, then if you were to add a buyer in ShoWorks 2020, the next available buyer number is 101. That is the same case within the online site. It's going to get assigned to the next available number that is sitting in the auction site. Buyer numbers can be manually changed to a number that isn't being used at any point if you run into any conflicts. I do have a tip of what to do if you think, I don't know how we're not going to be able to utilize buyer registration in ShoWorks 2020. That's the way we do it. That's the way we've always done it, but we want to utilize online auction too. We've got a tip for you. Create a buyer with a higher number that will be used for ShoWorks auction online registrants. This allows for any staff that could be utilizing ShoWorks client, ShoWorks 2020, for buyer registration at the same time that buyers are being registered online to utilize the lower numbers available while higher numbers are being assigned to buyers online. This is going to help you safeguard any buyer number conflicts. I'm going to show you an example. In this case, you can see on my buyer list that I had basically provisioned up to number 99, Jane Clark is sitting over here. And then I decided, you know what? I want to allow buyer registration in both systems. So let me go ahead, and I literally called it dummy buyer, but you could put in your own name or a placeholder buyer or the fair name, something, or it could be yourself. I want to be that buyer number. I entered a dummy buyer at 994. And what happened is everybody who registered on the online site entered, they were assigned a number after 994. There's a second provision warning that you're going to get if there is a buyer name conflict. If there is a buyer name conflict, the buyer will not go across to the ShoWorks auction site. The two systems are not set up to determine if the persons are one and the same. You know, there could be two, you know, Grant Smiths out there, and you want to make sure that they are in fact two different people. If it is two different people, change the buyer name in ShoWorks 2020 or the auction site, whichever one is having the conflict, and reprovision. Indicate that they're two different people, give them a different middle initial or whatever that might be. If it is the same person, then delete one of the buyers in either system and just reprovision. I understand that it may not be as simple as that because you may need to move transactions that might have already been placed to the buyer you choose to keep. But if you don't, then you're never going to get all of those transactions on one buyer at the same time. This is that same provision email that you're going to get in your inbox. The highlighted part says the following buyers did not provision because their names were taken by another buyer in the auction site. So the fact that they did not provision means they did not go over to the online site. It has the steps to fix, and heed this warning once again. In the case of Auction Monitor, when data is flowing back from ShoWorks Auction into ShoWorks 2020, if there is a buyer name or a buyer number conflict, then the buyer and any associated transactions or payments will not show up. This can be mitigated by ensuring that those provision warning resolutions are tended to in a timely manner. You'll be notified of the buyers having issues and directed on how to fix them if you run into any cases with the Auction Monitor sending them back over to ShoWorks 2020. I'm going to go ahead and move on to transactions. If you do have questions that summarize the whole buyer portion, throw the questions in. The reason the buyer names and numbers is so important is because it really drives where everything else is going to land. Transactions feed over from ShoWorks Auction to ShoWorks 2020, and I have them listed out in the various types so that you can see how each is handled differently. Same as ShoWorks 2020, once a transaction is attached to it, it cannot be deleted. Add-on transactions, whether they are added or deleted from the auction site, they will automatically update when Auction Monitor is turned on. In the auction admin, the add-ons populate on the add-ons module. They appear here after being entered by a buyer or by an administrator in the add-on tool. Add-ons are going to appear against the buyer as a buyer transaction. In this case, our buyer is Sadie Hawkins, buyer ID number 16, and she gave an add-on to invoice number 13, and the exhibitor was Emery Stidham for $50. Add-ons also come across and they'll appear against the sales invoice. In this case, on invoice number 2, Audrey Brighton has received a handful of add-ons all associated with different buyers. And those all came across immediately at the time that they were entered into the online site. Let's say you had your ShoWorks open and you are anticipating that an add-on should have come across. You only need to hit this refresh button because sometimes the database just needs a refresh to see that the new data is there. A handful of our fairs conduct a consortium style auction. If you do it, then you know it. If you don't, you can ignore it. Consortium bid transactions, whether they are added or deleted from the auction site, they're going to update automatically when auction monitor is turned on, the same as add-ons. On demand, by clicking the Clerk Winning Bids button in the Auction Admin Auction Monitor module, the winning competitive bids will come across. And this is intentional. If you're actually clerking your auction within ShoWorks Auction on the online auction, then you are using what's called the spotter tool. Quite often during a live auction, which is when your competitive bids are most often in play, the pace is such that there might be a second or a third administrator that is updating transactions in the spotter tool. Examples of what could be updated are the buyer, any splits that have occurred, any flooring designation, or the final destinations or destination notes that would be associated with that. Next week in my webinar, I'm going to be talking about how you view the splits and the flooring and get destination reports directly out of this. The idea is that this is where you're entering that data. It's available to you in reports out of the online auction. And that is where you, if you are clerking your sale, you want to have all of that information in here. So because it is data elements that flow back over into ShoWorks with those winning bids, and you want to make those updates here. In the case of clerking, the auction is being done, update in the auction site, let it flow over to ShoWorks 2020. If the person on the block cannot do it, then employ that second or third administrator to handle the splits, or the one that's going to handle the destination updates. The nice thing is that this is an online URL in order to access the admin, and you don't need additional licenses for it. So as many people that you can throw at it, they can work on getting your transactions ready to flow back. All of this data is meant to get updated, and then you can send over your winning bids. The idea is that if you're needing to start checking people out, you can clerk winning bids, continue to update here, clerk winning bids. The clerk winning bids is sending them all in batch over to the auction site, from the auction site over into ShoWorks 2020, so that you can do all of your final billing there. Someone can walk up to the cashier and that information will be in ShoWorks 2020. This is a tip, and this is what I just said, but quite often during live auction, the pace is such that you've got that second or third administrator updating the splits, the flooring, or the final destination or destination notes. Enter it into the auction site and let it flow over to ShoWorks 2020. Sorry, it's easy to get caught up in how you used to do it, but this is a much more straightforward method. Oh, I did put this in here. I thought, why didn't I add the button so that you could see it right here? I tried to put the slides in so I wouldn't be bouncing back and forth because there is so much to get through. But here's what you can see when you go through the effort to click that clerk winning bids. It's pulling all of those winners from this winners table that sits in the winners module, and you can see all of them. If you've already split it, the splits are going to appear in this table, but that is the data that you're sending over to ShoWorks and all of its associated destinations, flooring designations, etc. This is where it shows up. In this case, you can see in ShoWorks where there was definitely a split between Triple R Ranch and Brewer Cattle of who purchased Cameron Jones's animal. So you can see that those two came over, and that's where they are going to appear against the sales invoice. And then if I were Triple R Ranch, I would see that that transaction appears on my bill. That covers the transactions, and as far as the actual transactions that are being made, the next thing is the buyer payments. The buyer payments are going to automatically populate in ShoWorks 2020, dependent on the success of the buyer payments as documented in the online auction. The amount recorded will be less any payment gateway fees that are assessed. This is the same behavior that you experience in online entries. For example, in this case, you have a buyer payment that was made, and it appears under buyer data, buyer payments module in the auction admin. There's been one payment made for an amount of $5,000, and the status all the way through to the end is approved. When you flow over into ShoWorks, when Auction Monitor is on, that data flows over, that buyer payment appears against the buyer under the Payments tab. And when you write bills, the payment will be applied to the bill that's created. I think I've said this once or twice already, but I made a big slide for it. But if you still have any type of data that is going to flow from ShoWorks Auction over into ShoWorks 2020, update your buyer data in ShoWorks Auction and let it flow over to ShoWorks 2020. It is a much simpler way to avoid any collisions. Adding and updating data triggers updates when Auction Monitor is turned on. And if you ever need to clerk all the data, the buttons are there. But if you're making updates in ShoWorks 2020, let's say, buyer Christina McFarling is, you wanted to change the address. Well, if you were to click the clerk all items from the auction site and push them over into ShoWorks 2020, it's going to get overwritten with whatever is in the auction site. So it's a really great idea to update there and pull it down. Next, I'm going to talk about the data that feeds the auction lots and that appear on the auction site. So this is not all the data that exists in ShoWorks. It's all of the data that affects or appears on the auction site itself. The data comes from a number of tables, including entries, exhibitors, divisions, sales adjustments, sales invoices that you see here. I'm going to talk about each of these data elements in the next slides. The data moves over to create the auction lots when the provision button is pressed. So when you hit that provision button, we're building up. We've just brought over buyers, and now we're sending over all of our lots. You don't have to have all of this data perfect to send it to the auction site. Most fairs will provision a number of times before every last detail is exactly as they want it. So a lot of times people get fearful that they have to have everything tightened up before they hit that provision button. But if you're 80% of the way there, hit provision, see how it looks, and let your team go online and look and do some QAing to see if maybe something else needs to be changed before you provision it over again. At the very beginning of your setup, before you even start your online entries, you set up your division names and potentially your classes. You can also set up your division sponsors that can appear on your online entries, noted by the screenshot on the bottom left. It includes sponsor name and the sponsor website and even a sponsor banner that you'll see on the online site as well as on online entries if you have those sponsors ahead of time. If you're not using those, that's a great way to get some clicks for a business out there that wants to help your fair out. This is also where you designate whether or not you'll be selling that division by the head or by the pound. Most of you who have run a sale in the past, y'all know this and you know what to select for which livestock that you've got. Once you've uploaded your setup to the cloud for online entries, you'll start collecting exhibitor and entry information. The exhibitor name is the name entered in online entries. The notes field, exhibitor notes, field on the exhibitor can be populated on the exhibitor in online entries if you set it up to be populated by the exhibitor. I believe everyone who is going through the process of uploading a setup, you're familiar with in the online entries. I'll actually pop over to it real quickly. There we go. In your setup and where it goes to talk about online, you have what fields you want to show, hide, optional, or required. And there are quite a few of you out there that like to pull that exhibitor notes and let them fill in a little bit about themselves. That does pull over to the auction site, but that's that exhibitor notes that appears. And that's where it gets set up. Okay. This tip came from one of our developers. This is just a little tidbit about exhibitor name. Data associated with the exhibitor is not going to appear in ShoWorks Auction when the exhibitor name in ShoWorks 2020 has a different capitalization from the seller in the sale module of ShoWorks 2020. When you go through the effort of creating your sale and creating your sale, it's automatically creating those seller names. And there's something with the capitalization that could occur, but this is just, it's something rare, but we've seen it happen to a few fairs, and it's just very notable since I was going deep into the details here, that if for some reason your exhibitor name was all lowercase and in the sale side it was all capitals or had the first letters capitalized, that could be a reason why your exhibitor is not showing up. So don't worry, if you hit this, that's when you email support@showorkscloud.com. I'm putting this out there because it is one method of troubleshooting, and that troubleshooting you can do through the knowledge base as well. We have this on there. Next, I'm going to talk about I'm going to go ahead and talk about the entry data. As you would expect, most of the data that is coming across onto the auction site is associated with the entry itself. I'm going to go ahead and move over to ShoWorks. I don't know if y'all utilize quick entries or not, but I think quick entries is a fantastic tool if you're not already using it. There are steps, and maybe Kylie will throw that into the chat, but in the help manual, you go to help and then the manual is right here on the top left. It talks about how to set up a quick entries and how to utilize it. But the reason it's so cool is that you can see all of the entries filtered however you'd like, and you can memorize various views of it with fields in it that can help you throughout your show. You can create as many as you want. There might be a limit, but I don't know what it is. What I've done is I've created one called Auction Setup, and I'm actually going to talk about each of these items. This is all the data that impacts the auction in some form. I've tried to put them in the order I think would be easiest to talk about them. First is just your exhibitor information and the division tied to that lot. When people are submitting their entries, they're tying that entry to the exhibitor name and that division, and those are those first two columns. Ultimately, if anyone is going to end up in the sale or on the online site, they're going to have a sale order in order to get added to the sale. So this sale order sits here. Typically, the first time that you pull this up, your sale order is going to be blank, and a lot of people utilize quick entries to hand enter their sale order, and so that is that's how a lot of people utilize this. The win ID is something that I talked about in the past. Some people will think that, oh, the online entries deadline has come and gone. However, Susie Jane, she was supposed to get in there and she didn't. So I'm just going to go ahead and hand enter her into ShoWorks, and then she'll appear on the online site. That is not the case. You have to have that win ID in order for that entry to appear on in the auction site. If you try to push a lot over and it does not have that win ID, you're going to get a warning or an error, provision error that says that these lots did not have a win ID, therefore they're not going to show up. And you would need to go back, enter them on online entries, and then insert that entry everywhere you had that one without the win ID. So word from those that have been there is if they want to appear on the online site at all ever, then you can go back, put them through online entries, adjust the deadline, and then adjust it back after you've created it so that they can get in there. This is actually called auction here, but it is in fact the user-defined entry list 9 field. The UD entry list 9 field is a user-defined field. User-defined fields are set up under the setup, general fees, and online, and you can go to the user-defined field. Down here, I have set up my UD entry list 9 field to be called auction. And then I've also designated some various selections that could be selected there, depending on what auction that I want to use. There's a number of ways this field is used. You might have a small sale and a large sale. You want to split your feathers and your livestock. You might have a Friday night and a Saturday night sale. It's however you think that you would like to separate your lots for the ease of your buyers to find the lots they're looking for. Some people choose to do this, some people choose not to. That's totally up to you. Before I jump to the next one, I'm also going to show you that I have a UD entry list 10 field called lot designation. That lot designation does come into play for any of you that are doing add-on only lots. Let me go back now that you know why my user-defined fields are being called something differently. I'm going to go back to my home toolbar, quick entries, and collect my auction setup. And here you're going to see my auction. I have designated, I've got some that are going into competitive, some are going to consortium, freezer, and my add-on sale. If y'all have visited my demo site, this is what feeds my demo site. And I do set up these different auctions so I can show y'all different examples. For simplicity, I'm just going to filter on what's add-ons. I want all of these to go to my add-on auction. And I set this example actually intentionally. All of my add-on lots, I actually want their lot designation to be add-on only lot. What this is used for is it's used by the auction site to generate a specific behavior that is going to be expected for those lots. And so working in quick entries is very simple. All I have to do, especially when I've already got a few in there, I can update them to add-on only lot. It's updated when I provision, it's going to be updated on the site. Anything that is competitive, if the lot designation is left blank, our system defaults everything to competitive. So that is just the way that that works. But if you wanted to put a lot designation that you could, consortium lots, they actually, oops, I was changing it instead of filtering on it. If I were to filter on consortium sale, these are all the lots that I want to be consortium lots. Set that user-defined entry list 10, my lot designation to consortium lot. That way, those lots take on the behavior that I want to see on the online auction. The very last sale example of types of sales that we have is a barn sale or freezer sale. I have my auction called freezer. Oh, I did it again. Instead of filtering, I was trying to change it. I'm going to freezer. In a freezer sale, you are wanting to set your lot to be a buy now lot. And that means that there's not going to be any bidding. Whoever clicks buy now is taking ownership of that lot, and it is going to be at a price named by the auction itself. That brings us to this next column, which is the buy now price column, also known as the user-defined currency one field. This is where you put the price of that animal. So it is, this particular set of broilers is $50. These rabbits are $50 and a $300 barrow. So I don't know why the reserve champion is being sold for $50, but I don't know. We'll just go with that. So in the case, this is how multi-auction is set up with that user-defined entry list 9 field. This is how we designate add-on only lots or buy now lots, consortium lots, using that UD entry list 10 field. If there is not an auction that is designated, then everything just falls into an auction called auction. The only time you really need to worry about that field is if you have lots sitting in your sale in ShoWorks, and there are certain ones that you do not want to show on the online auction site. So if you, in your sale order, you have your livestock and your ag mechanics, and you don't want your ag mechanics to show up on the online site, then you would utilize this field to make sure that all of those ag mechanics got put to a different auction so that you wouldn't activate it online. And then the other way is if you did actually have multi-auction, you would utilize it. In this lot designation, it is important to note that an add-on only lot can be changed to a competitive lot or a consortium lot, but you cannot change a competitive lot or consortium lot back to an add-on only lot. That is specifically because Bids, if they've been made, then you just can't change the nature of that lot itself. So that is just one thing to note as I walk through this. Special placing, if you have any special placing, this is where it appears. Not everyone uses special placing field. You might use a different field for your reserves or your grands, but if you want it to appear on the online site, this is where it goes. We added the ability for the description field to appear on the online site. A lot of times this is utilized in silent auctions or art. That's where we see it mostly, but I put, this is where the description field populates, just so that when you go look at the demo site, you'll see where it populates. Very creative there. We talked about division sponsors. There's also the ability to do a lot sponsor. I don't know, there are people that have them. If you want there to be a lot sponsor, you just enter it under sponsor. Show weight, as you weigh people in, you're populating show weight. If you have some specific formula for sale weight being utilized, then that gets populated, but that weight goes across into the online site and shows. The place itself does not show on the online site, but it does play a part in you setting your sale order. So that's why I have it here. Let me scoot on over. Class does show on the auction site, and club. I'm going to make a note of, I'll probably have Kylie's assisting me today, to go ahead and take an example of what I have in this auction setup and create an article specifically of what I've included, so that you can see how I've set this up. This is all the data. If I'm helping a fair, I go throw all of this in to a quick entries report and start diving in. So let's see. The next thing I am going to show, I'm going to flip back. Actually, I'm going to pop out of here. I knew I had so much, so I actually am trying to do a script, which is good for y'all. In this case, moving on into what goes over to the auction site is the sales invoice data. You have the invoice number, and then you also have a minimum bid amount. The invoice number is here, and the minimum bid is that unit price before you even get started. Once an invoice goes to the auction site, don't delete it, only renumber. You're going to hear me say that probably 5 more times in the next 2 minutes. So I'm going to explain a little bit of that here in a moment. This is notable for invoice and lot numbers at this time. While it is possible to enter a decimal in ShoWorks 2020 in the invoice number, decimal lot numbers are not currently supported in ShoWorks Auction. What this means is if you have lots 1 through 100 and you missed a lot and you are used to putting it in at, inserting it in between 2, and it would be 50.5, getting it in between 50 and 51. Right now, we don't support the decimal. We're working on it, but it is notable, so that if you're thinking about pushing them there, there's some solutions that I can work with you on how you do your process or how you can get it to show up. But I definitely wanted to point that out. This is a tip because we do run into this little bit of confusion here and there. The value that is entered into the sale order field, it does not flow over into the ShoWorks auction site. It is only a tool used for setting the sale as it relates to online auction. If you're running reports or printing sale books based on sale order, then it is up to you to make sure that the sale order number matches the invoice number. The invoice number is the lot number that appears on the auction site. There's so many reasons why that is the case. There's scenarios where you might actually have a lot that is getting resold. So you might have the same entry sold multiple times, all with different sellers, that being the one that comes to mind most. Let me hop over and show you a little bit of what I'm diving into here. I don't know if y'all are used to this, but I love to go into ShoWorks, and in my sale and my entries, I split into a spreadsheet. For me, I can see the data more clearly all as one big picture. So if y'all don't use that, go use it. Just my tip of the day. I've created a sale, and this is my sale. I've gone from main menu and clicked on sale, or you can click on sale at the top. This shows my sale order, and this shows my invoice number. My sale order was utilized to set my invoice number, but I started my invoices at 1001 for whatever reason. In this case, I just did. Then it's really important to note that if I go through and I push these over into the auction site and I provision them over and transactions are getting placed against them, then I'm in a situation where I cannot delete these invoices. If you've opened your auction site and you've already sent lots over there, don't delete those lots. And you say, but Christina, that's not the lot. I need to rearrange them because I opened my add-ons before the final sale order was set. How do I do that? Well, what you do is you can push your lots over, create your sales invoices and send them over to the auction site ahead of time. This is actually a really good example. You can have them all really high invoice numbers, and then you get your final sale order. So once I have my final sale order, I can go in and I can go to tools and I can renumber my records. And I can say, I want to renumber my sales invoices, and I want to do it based on my sale order. And I want to go ahead and start with number 1 this time. So we're ready. We're ready to go. And I know that this is where I want, I'm printing my sale book. It's sale order based on the sale order. So it's going to tell me you're about to renumber. Yes, I wish to continue. All of my invoices were renumbered, and I'm going to close out of this, and it populates. And this is where I go through and I say, oh, number 1 is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3. Yep, I'm in order. Right here is where I get off. Okay. For whatever reason, I got off and I need to fix this. If you need to fix it, this is where you can go in and say, you know what, I actually did want these to match the sale order exactly. Let me go in and edit these records. And right here, I can type in and make it match. Oops, I'm jumping a little bit all over the place. Oh, you cannot use the same number twice. So I need to choose another number, but you can manually enter and update those in order to get them to match your sale order if that is what you are gunning for. Everyone has a different method, but that seems to be something that everyone does try to do. When it comes to deleting invoices, there is an exception, and that one exception is going to be like if you're needing to scratch a lot from your sale. In that case, you're going to remove any transactions associated with it from the auction site, and then you'll delete it from the auction site, and then you'll delete it remove any transactions or delete it from your sale. A lot of times that's a lot of conversation around that situation rather than just systematically doing it. So it is a manual process. Kylie just dropped the scratching a lot knowledge base article. If that's something that you're going to do, it's in the chat. So check that out. Okay. Wow, it is already 4. If y'all will hang tight with me, I will go super fast and I need to start scheduling these for an hour and a half. Okay, real quickly, that was all of the data. It's where do you see this data? One, if you've looked at the auction site at all, you're going to see it in the filters. That's where buyers are going to see it on the auction site. You're also going to see it in the area below the photo describing the lots. Note that the bidding by the pound and by the head and highest bidder data, those things aren't going to show up if it's add-on only, but I gave a more comprehensive screenshot here. When you dive into the lot detail, you can see everything from top to bottom. We're looking at the exhibitor name and the club and the city, the lot number, special placing, sale weight, the type of bidding. Let's see, that description is showing up. This is the exhibitor notes and auction notes I'll talk about next week, but you can also see the lot sponsor and the photo. So all of that is here. Most of this is data you were already collecting anyways. That's the way it was intended. But I wanted to make sure you saw the correlation about which fields actually feed into here. The next slide for your live auction, if you haven't already engaged in it, the auction cast, it shows the pictures, it shows the lot number, it shows the exhibitor, it shows the, we're looking at the division and the sale weight, the club, the sponsors down in the bottom left-hand corner. All of this is that data allowing you to put it into our streaming, our digital signage that you can utilize around your arena, regardless of whether you're using add-ons or not. If you are doing an actual hybrid sale or a sale then in clerking within the auction site, then you have the ability for the buyer data to also show up here. But all of this data that we've been talking about can be broadcasted to your audiences in these ways. One of the last things that I wanted to talk about is the sale adjustment fee. We actually went through this with a sale this past weekend saying, I wish y'all had a way for us to place a sale adjustment or add a fee to all of our barrows and it show up on the auction site for people to be able to check out. Well, we haven't gotten it out there enough, I guess, because you do have that ability. Within ShoWorks, you go in after those invoices have been created and you can apply go through the sale adjustment wizard to apply those fees to those specific invoices. If you do a flat fee, it is based on a flat fee. Then when you hit that provision button, they're going to come over to the online site and you're going to see them. The buyers will see them when they go to checkout. So that is there and can get included. This is a tip. Look at the auction lots module in the auction admin when you provision. In the this is me going off script. Hold on one second. In the case that you are I didn't have this one pulled up. In the case that you're provisioning your lots over, this auction setup and auction entries right here, it is fairly important. Usually you're just double checking that everything looks like you want it to be, but when you see gaping holes of data that aren't here, there's a couple of things that need to be done. sometimes need to set your bid increments if you are allowing for bidding online. And then you can set your schedule of when bidding is going to start and when it's going to end. But you can usually, what I do is I come and I do a little up and down on my filters, sorting to look at my data and just kind of say, yep, everything's, $50 or less. Oh, 50 cents. Are these supposed to be 50 cents? Oh, yes, they're by the pound. They're good to go. Look at anything that looks out of place, and usually just by sorting, it'll narrow it down to anything that might look out of place. So always look at that. My next tip is don't wait until setting your sale order to configure the data for the online auction site. Once you have pulled entries from online entries, there's data that you can prepare ahead of your sale and even show if you know how you're going to set up your online site. Once you get into your sale, it's busy, it's hectic. So take care of some of that vision ahead of time and go ahead and get your entries set up. You don't have to go in and say only the ones that are going to the sale need to be set up as add-on only lots. If they're not going to go on the online site, that field doesn't even matter for them, but you could go ahead and set them all as add-on only lots. For your online entries, your exhibitor notes, entry description, division sponsor, by the head, by the pound, designation, all of that can go. After downloading online entries, you've got flat fee adjustments, user defined entry list 9, your auction designation, your list 10, which is your lot designation, during and after the show, your places, your classes, show weights, special placings, entry sponsors, and then ultimately at the time of creating your sale is your unit price. So you can get it narrowed down to where really once you create that sale order and you create that sale, you're pushing things over. So it can be really, really valuable. I realize at this point I am over, but I am going to push through. You will get a recording of this. So if you need to clock out of this, I completely understand, but I'm just going to power through until I get through these last few things. Because the next thing I'm going to talk about is the transactions that move from online auction to ShoWorks 2020. It's pertinent to note, we already talked about transactions when I was talking about the buyers, but transactions come across and they also attach to the sales invoices. Everything's very straightforward with the add-on transactions and the consortium bids. When Auction Monitor is turned on, they flow directly into the sales invoices and they update them. The reason you're attaching kind of that same transaction, it goes to the buyers and then it goes over to the sales invoices, is so that you can bill and that you can do payouts. For competitive bids, you do have to take into consideration that these transactions can be split, floored, destinations could be modified. You can have destination notes added to them. And all this is going to come across when you click that clerk winning bids button in the Auction Monitor module. All utilizing Auction Monitor, but on your demand, but that is where that information is coming from. Whew, we've talked about buyers, we've talked about entries and lots, transactions, going back to the sales invoices, and finally, which is the most simple to talk about, but probably one of the most labor intensive for some of you who choose to take pictures and load them yourselves instead of letting exhibitors do it. But the data flow from FairVault, really FairVault holds all of those images and videos. You click that button once you've already provisioned those lots, and then you hit the reload all button. If an image or video needs to be changed, you update it in FairVault and you click the reload all button. So it's probably the most satisfying and gratifying of all the buttons to press, because you're, playing with the pictures, watching them come over across. Final tip. This is my last slide. Look for the provision email now that we have it, and check the provision history every time you provision. just to make sure you've addressed any concerns. If you end up with a provision that has nothing to worry about, then you're going to have a very smooth clerking process in the end. So look for that email. We do have a new systematic way of contacting you. I'm going to show you where to place your email. It's going to be in the setup under online, and it's that reply email address that is going into up into your online entries. Take a chance, and you will take a moment and you will update that, and that's where you're going to be getting all of your emails from. Take it a step further and add support at ShoWorksCloud.com into your contacts, because that will help make sure it's not hitting your spam or your promotions or your invites, wherever Google Mail tries to put them or whatever you're doing. So anyways, that really concludes all of the part I was trying to cover specifically around data. Thank you all for hanging in there. It's not the most picturesque, beautiful type of presentation, but it really, I hope, gives some insights into what drives what and how it's moving back and forth. I saw a question in the chat, and I am happy to take some more. Let's see. Is there an update to how to move all the photos for those of us that do take our own photos? So Spencer still oversees everything with FairVault, even with FairVault getting bought out by Ungerbach. He is still at the helm of that. And I don't think there's been any major updates in regards to those photos. Our team has helped a few fairs with loading photos, and we actually created an article just of what we found was a streamlined, easy way to find the entries to load those photos that we can share with you. But I don't know that the magic solution that you're looking for, Erin, is there yet. Let me read your question that you submitted before that. Can we move over all of the lots to the auction site after the online registration is done, and then later remove the lots that did not make the sale? Yes, you can. We have quite a few, even some of our really, really large sales, who open their sites way in advance for add-ons. I know Kern is looking to do that this year. KDISD does that. As soon as they close their entries, they are pushing those lots onto the auction site. What they're doing is actually very similar to the example I showed in my sale, where they're creating an arbitrary sale order, maybe based on entry number or alphabetically by division, and they're numbering those lots to be, 1,001 or 10,001, really, really big and really high, so that the exhibitor and the buyers don't look at the site and automatically think they're the first lot or they're the second lot. It's quite obvious that their lot numbers are going to get reassigned at some future date. And so they're using that renumbering tool in order to get those lots pushed up to the auction site and renumber them, and they're re-provisioning to make them match the correct sale order when they have that final sale order. The other thing, I had one other thought that just escaped me. We're moving everything over there as soon as it happens. They're renumbering it. I think that might be, when you go. Yes. So the last part of your question was, can we just delete them afterwards? So that's when you would use the scratching a lot methodology. And you do have to take into consideration what you're going to do if those individuals are no longer eligible for add-ons. If you have the case where everyone who enters is going to be eligible for add-ons, then you can just change the type of lot that they are if they're not going to be a competitive bid lot. Okay, and Erin is saying they were going to remove a few because they go to the live auction instead. So if you're actually going to take bids online, or however you do it, you can change their lot designation, or you can remove them, and you would just need to make plans for what to do with those add-ons that are placed. You might be contacting buyers, or depends on y'all's policy there. So, all right, that was a really good question. And that gets with an understanding of what can be done. Those are the type of solutions that we can produce. So a lot of things can happen. All right. I don't see any other questions being asked. I appreciate such an energetic sign up for the webinars that I'm doing over the course of May. These are going to be put into the archives and become the training, since so much has evolved and solidified in how it's handled. So these are being used for the future, where we're going to point everyone when they want to know what is happening and what's going on between ShoWorks and the auction site and how they two interact. But I hope y'all found this helpful, and I appreciate each of you for showing up. If we can assist you, feel free to email us at info@showworkscloud.com. Thanks, guys, and y'all have a great day.